Can you hear me without the mic?
Yes.
Yes, you can?
Yeah.
All right, so let me start by introducing myself. I'm Zeev, Zelig. I work in the pharma business for the last 33 years. And I'm only 45, so that's quite an achievement. About 20 years ago, I got a phone call, and a friend of mine said, well, I have an interesting proposal to work for a company called Genzyme from the US. I never heard in my life about this company. And he said, but they are dealing with something very unique. They are dealing with orphan drugs. Again, I never heard about orphan drugs in my life. I'll get to that in a second. And I said, perfect, let's hear about this company. So they interviewed me, and somehow, and I don't really know until this day why, they liked me, and they said, okay, you are our person in Israel. And I said, fine, where will be the office? And they say, where do you live? And I gave them the address. They said, there will be your office. I said, oops, well, something is different in this company. Well, I started in a closed balcony in my home, and that was Genzyme, and only until I sold $2 million, I was allowed to move to a 50 square meter office. Now, I'm telling that not because, I want to say how poor we were, which we were not, but the philosophy of the culture of this company, and it was quite unique. And when people are asking me, what do we do? And I say, I'm on the saving life business. And they said, oh, you work for the Red Cross? I said, no, I don't. I work for a pharma company that are producing products that are life-saving products. And this is something that I think most of us forget when we look at pharma companies and we try to evaluate what we do. Few words of reminding to ourselves. States are not inventing and producing drugs or medications. Companies does. We put millions and billions of dollars on innovative products, and we have investors that likes to have some outcome of their investment. And if we, pharma companies, are not coming with the right dividends of their investment, they will invest somewhere else, on the tobacco business, the oil business, or God forbid, opening a lawyer office or something. By the way, I have two daughters and both of them are lawyers, so this is why I can afford myself to say that. And this is a very interesting world, because now, when we look at this changing world, we understand that everybody is on our back. When I say our, it's the biopharma companies. And that's not true, because this is kind of a balanced market that is changing daily. It is a balanced market that has several partners: the governments, the payers, the companies, the patients, patient organizations, etc. And the interests many times are not the ones that everybody can really understand. And what is really interesting, that companies, pharma companies now, more and more understand that we have social responsibility. That we don't only produce product and, as I said earlier, suck the money out of the country. No, no, no. We produce life-saving product, quality of life product to the nations that we are working in. And we want to see the countries respect us for what we are. And this is the language that usually when I talk to governments, I like to hear. And whenever people are pointing at us and say, oh, you are not ethical, etc., I stop the conversation and I said, let's change the wording of this discussion. And the wording should be a little bit different. So let's start with the presentation. And the presentation is based on two things. One, on the amazing struggle that most of our companies are facing these days on the pharma world. And the second thing, on this desperate need to find a balance between many factors. And let's look at some of them. Glasses, guys. All right, so my presentation will be kind of a tasting meal. It's not a full meal. We'll have kind of a tapas, or in this case some sweets, but we'll go over and jump from one subject to another just to see if we can cover most of the issues that are relevant to what we present. The one thing that we understand fully and we can realize is that the world of biopharma is changing. And only if we look at these two pies and we see what happened in the world, and we see in 2008, the US stands for 247 million sales, and we look what happens on 2020 expectation, we see that there is a big shift from the centralization of the US and it's moving to other regions. But that's only one thing that is happening. The other, which we presented very nicely by Nissim this morning, is that many of the mega companies are disappearing, and we'll find ourselves probably in the next 5 years with very small number of companies, because one company is swallowing the other, and in the end of the day we'll have like 5, 6, 7 mega companies that will be kind of, I don't like the word, but it's a supermarket that will have animal health, cosmetics, OTC, ethical product, biotechnology products, etc. And of course, generics and biogenerics. And if you look at the list, what happened in the last few years, it's amazing how the big pharmas swallowed many of the newcomers to this market in one hand, and on the other hand, merged by merger or acquisition with big pharmas as well. Now, one issue that I would like to address, which I heard it from an interesting guy that has a profession called futurist. This is a guy that is, trying to predict what will be in the future. And he said that, when you will, your children or grandchildren, they will live until the age of 100. And I started to laugh in my heart, and I said, who wants to live until the age of 100? And probably it's not true, because all of us wants to age the year at 100, but healthy, and with our mind working, and our physical capabilities as they are. But that's something that is very interesting, and we ask ourselves, is our industry, is our society ready to have people living until 100 and still want to party? And we do want to party, well, whatever the age is. And you look at this age, and then you realize that the group between 85 up to 100 will be a huge range of ages of people. And those people will have the same diseases that we are now treating, but we are treating them only for 5 years, or 6 years, or 7. But we will have to treat them for 20 years, or 15 years. So the need for a new discussion on chronic diseases, on elderly-based products, is going to be more serious than it was before. And many of our governments, when they are planning long-range plans, they tend to forget this point. And this is something that we have to take good care of. Now, it varies from country to country how much you spend on your expenditure on health. And always, I was responsible in my career in Genzyme for many countries, from the Middle East countries, Egypt, Turkey, Libya, Saudi, etc., to Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, Romania, etc. And wherever I go, and wherever I go, there are always complaints against the cost of medication. It can be $5, $500, $1,000, but still complaints will be, and it's right, because the burden of treatment on the budget is very high. But if at the end of the day, if you look at what we spend as a total of the total expenditure of the country, that's minor. And an additional $400,000 or euros or shekels or whatever the number is, that will not reflect dramatically the budget. But this is a tough decision. And when the language is changing? When a discussion comes to one person. When it comes to the sister or the wife of a minister. Then the discussion changed. And one of our best successes were in Saudi, when one of the patients was a son of one of the very rich people in Saudi. And then immediately after we treated his son, the door opened. That was not something unethical. It was properly approved by all the institution. But that was something that really was amazing to see. Now, another thing that is happening during the last few years is that we pharma companies are losing many of our IP rights. And you know, intellectual property is what we have. And when you start working on a new medication, you start in a given time. It takes you about 15 years to develop a product. You spend $1.5 billion, and then you have 5 more years to sell the product. And follow this, you start having the generic companies knocking on your door. So look what is going on in the last 2 years. We are going to lose $106 billion in 2011 and 2012. And this is only one figure. It means from the total pie of revenues that all the pharma company has, this is what we are losing. Let's look to another graph that will explain it in a better way. Those are the products that are going to expire and to have to become generics during the last years and in the given year 2012. And you see on the top of 2011, one of the largest products in the market, Lipitor. And you say, so if we are losing so much, what will happen? What will compensate for what we are losing? We'll get to that in a second. Just a touch of the economy struggle that we are in, and it has relevant to what we discussed earlier. This is something very interesting that was published lately on the economic problems that we have, and it talked about Greece. And an interesting thing that, you know, and I was responsible for Genzyme in Greece. I established the office, and I had to pay a lot of the debt that the company has when I purchased the company from the distributor. And one of the things that I was shocked to see is that in Greece, out of all the European countries, they had the lower percentage of generic products. And they paid enormous money for pharmaceutical products. And when you looked at that, you said, so why is that? Was it clever? No, it wasn't. Because when suddenly comes a time that the state is getting to a very, very shaky economic situation, then they are going to the extreme. And then they are cutting the prices, they are not paying for years, you have to run after your money, and then you say, no, let's think about a more balancing way of looking at this picture. Now, you see that, you know, the share of generics of the total pharmaceutical market changed from country to country. Once again, there is no magic number. And every country has to decide for their own environment. But one thing should be sure, and people should understand that if you slaughter the cow, there will not be milk later on. And if you don't invest in innovation, you will not see generic in the end of the road. And there is no generic without innovation. So things should be balanced. And what is this balance? It's a matter of discussion and a matter of balance between many interests. And only with open discussion with governments, with payers, with our pharma company, pharma organization, IFPIA, and others, this can be done. This is a chart that shows you a little bit how much money some of our member companies are going to lose because of losing IP on some of their products. And we look at that, you see something very interesting because those companies are going to shrink dramatically. When a company shrinks like that, and they have a very, very poor pipeline with new product coming in, they have to introduce their new medication with extremely high cost price. And then again, correctly, some of the governments say, guys, we cannot pay these amounts. So some of the mechanisms that the countries are putting when they start to talk to us are those that we are going to look now. And many of these governments or payers are talking to us in different languages. And many of them are saying, guys, we want to have some restriction. Let me just go back one step and remind all of us that although government never invest a penny in the pharmaceutical business, it means they are not owing any pharmaceutical products or factories or innovative centers, we are the most regulated industry in the world. Look what's going on in countries. You know, even a country that is probably the most socialist country in terms of pharma, like France, they are introducing a law that will cut 10 to 20% reimbursement group. Many of these countries, and I'll give you an example, you can read the list by yourself, but I worked in Turkey. When I started to work in Turkey in 2002, we had a given price, and they used to have a referral basket of prices, which included 5 or 6 or 7 European countries. One day in 2006, they said, it's even later, 2008, they said, we are going to have 11% cut on the medication. All the medication, 11%. So everybody, every general manager, every company has to cut in their budget 11%. 2 years ago, they came with another cut, and this cut became 23%. And now they're talking about having a cut accumulated that is going to be 41%. Now, 2 things happened. Very interesting, thing. The first one, that some of the companies said, guys, if you don't put an end to that, we will leave your country. Can you guess what happened? How many companies left?
None.
None. And those companies never left because of the social responsibility we have. Because you cannot just close a market and go out because you don't do enough money in this country. But there is a message. Because investment in Turkey that are giving a very, very low price for our medication is almost zero. And whenever they come to a pharma company and say, why don't you open an R&D center here? We said, why would we? If you do not buy our innovative product, we will not have enough money to invest in your country. So this is a double sword game, and this is a very interesting, regulatory change. And taking a place like Russia. Russia is one of our Genzyme biggest market, and I assume for many of my colleagues' markets. And Russia now is introducing a very interesting way of looking at new medication, and they are signing contracts with companies that are going to produce generics for products that have still the IP rights. And this is something that we don't like very much. Well, although it's a big country, we say, guys, violating our IP rights, that's probably not the right way to go. But we started to talk to them. And I hosted in Genzyme a delegation headed by the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Health with 40 people from Russia. And one thing that we understood, that one-sided decision is not benefiting anyone. And when we started to talk, we found out that they are very much interested in opening a center for stem cells research. And by talking to them, we realized that if we will maybe invest a small amount of money, we will save a lot more on the other side. So as I said, it's all about discussion and trying to balance the relationship. Now, countries are extremely innovative. Some of the slides, by the way, I stole from some of our friends, some from Orbimed and some from, by the way, your colleagues. But I purposely put it in because I wanted to share how different parts of the world are looking at the same issues. And you see, even countries that have what we call free pricing methodologies are looking at very indirect price restrictions. And it can be so different, from profit control, from, and we'll talk about it later on, from referral country pricing of other countries. And it's a boomerang. When one country changed, they say, oh, we had Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the UK. Now we want to add Hungary and the Czech Republic, of course, for given reason, because they are cheaper in price. This is the boomerang that changed, all the markets that have this referral system. And these changes are actually a very, very hard problem on the pharma companies. Just a word on risk sharing. You know, risk sharing is a very interesting way of saying we, governments or payers, want you to share some of our risks. It's not that they change places, they say, we want to share some of your risk. That's only from this side. We want you to share some of our risk. And when we start saying, guys, we invested $2 billion on developing 1 or 2 products that we are introducing in the market now, and you want us to give you, for instance, promises that the outcome will be exactly as we declared on the registration file. And we say that you have to understand that we need a little bit of flexibility. Not total flexibility, but a little bit of flexibility. Let me give an example of one of the discussions we have in a given country. You come with a product that is a life-saving product. There is no other product in the world. Patients will die without this product. And you say that this product is saving 10% of the patients. Is it a lot or not? How would you measure that? How would one measure that? When you look at what is going on the oncology field, so you understand sometimes that we expand life of oncology patients by 3 months to 6 months to 12 months. Would the government should pay $100,000 for that? I say yes. The patients say yes. The families say yes. Again, it's a very balanced issue. Now, going back, the pay-per-performance is an enormous push on most of our pharma companies. And the one thing that they say, it's, guys, you see, you promise that you will have 80% success as per your clinical trial. We will give you 75 to 85. You will have a range in between. If you will do 60%, you will pay us the difference between 60% and 5%. Now think about it. We will pay the government for something that we invested $1.5 billion to invest to save patients, and we'll have to pay the government back. This is something that is unheard of. And then they said, well, another issue. You said that 30 milligrams per kilo will be enough for patients. But we realized that maybe it's not enough. Maybe we have to put 35 or 40 milligrams per kilo. You will reimburse us for the extra amount that we use. And again, this is something that generating a lot of discussions with government and with payers. And this question is still open. And when you have open questions, here comes the place of innovative ideas of how to talk with governments. And when you have those discussions with governments, you come with ideas of some needs to define what it is outcome guarantee. I mean, what's outcome guarantee in medicine? I mean, that's something that, very little heard before. And what is really 100% efficacy or length of treatment? I mean, how would you define if an oncology patient will need a treatment for 2 years and then he dies? Or God forbid, you will live for 10 years, he will need a medication. Is it good or bad? But it's still a very interesting issue to discuss. And as I said earlier, it's the dosage. And when you define a dosage, is it the right dosage? Why don't you come with the right dosage? And we say, that's medicine. This is patients. We produce now products that will fit a group of patients. That will take us to another issue that will be the personalized medicine that will come in the future, that will tailor-made a medication per patient. But today, most of the products are aimed to groups of patients and not to individuals. Now, you know, the strict regulation pressure on pharma companies, biopharma companies, these days are unheard of. And you know, the path that we have to go when we submit a file to the FDA is unbelievable. It's not only the length of time and the amount of money, but they send back the file, they ask you once again to put it together in a different way, you send it once again, they said, okay, we have to have another 6 months to evaluate. Now, no blame. They have good reasons. And we look at the Vioxx experience. And they, you know, sometimes throw it in our face and say, guys, not every time you are 100% reliable. True. It doesn't mean that we need to stop everything to make it so expensive and so complicated. Now, one thing is sure, that we now invest more and more money on R&D. A lot more than we invested in the past. And I love the slide that Eric showed before, how much they are spending on R&D in the company. All my life in Genzyme, I knew that we spend between 17 to 18% of our total revenues in R&D. That's a big investment, guys. And by the way, there is a scale. How much companies on various fields are investing? And you take from IT, you go to the oil industry, you go to the food industry, and by far, this is the industries that invest more percentage or higher percentage than anyone else. But if you look at what is interesting here, is that the new chemical entity or biological products that are coming out of the pipeline, the numbers are going down. So you have two curves like that. One is extremely high and going higher, and the other one is going down. And how would we balance you know, this difference between these two scales? All right, I think I'll skip this one. And just to have you look at what we are investing, and I say by far from any other industry, that's amazing. The one behind us is the software and computer services, and they are 9.9%, and we are almost 16%. And the difference in the investment here is not only on the money, but it's on the length of time that we have to invest those investments and to wait for the revenues coming after that. Now, on top of everything that I said, another challenge that we have is that the cost of manufacturing gets higher and higher. It's not enough to produce now chemical products that are, you know, simple, and you produce pills, you put them in blisters, in packaging, put 4 languages leaflet and sell it in different markets. Today, everything should be tailor-made to the customers, to the groups, to the country, to the language in the country, and I'll tell you a funny story. One of our parliament members lately came with a bright idea in Israel that he wants to have, on top of the 3 formal languages, which is Hebrew, Arabic, and English, another language which is Russian. We have 1.5 immigrants from Russia. Well, okay, so we just try to explain that to translate all the leaflets of a company, that's a process. So the regulation, you know, immediately came, within 3 months you have to change it. I said, guys, impossible. And another clever member of the parliament said, oh, you know what? I think you have to have Braille, you know, the language for blind people, on the leaflet as well. And I said, Braille? How would you do that? And when I talked to him and I said, by the way, you know, Braille is not Esperanto. It's not the language that every, you know, blind person in the world can read the same. You'll have to have 4 Braille leaflets for every medication. Of course, he never thought about it. So, I mean, people are looking at restrictions that they have zero understanding about what they are putting on the pharma business. All right, I'll skip this one. Just one slide that showed in the last few years what were the markets of the biopharma and how it's changing. Those are percentages we will never see anymore. In China and India and Russia are going to take more and more part of the world percentage. And we have to aim to those emerging markets. And we have to be very careful about their needs. Because when you do a clinical trial on an oncology product, and this oncology product was tested in clinical trials on Caucasian, it's not given that it's going to be the same for Japanese. And it's not given that it's going to be the same in other countries. So now when you do a clinical trial, you have to look for a very, very wide base. Just a word on orphan drugs, and we had several words and several presentations on this issue. You know, when I started to get into this world, people said, what the hell are you talking about? Should we spend $200,000 on a patient per year? So we invented this slide that says, 1 out of 1,000 kids might born with a rare genetic disorder. But if it is your loved one, statistics doesn't matter. That's 100% for a mother or for a father or for a son. And many companies these days are looking for the orphan drugs field as one of the most important ones. And look what happened in the last few years. Sanofi had acquired Genzyme, and we are a part of the Sanofi group now. Pfizer had acquired Protalix. And GlaxoSmithKline maybe are going to acquire Shire, at least they are intending to do so, and many other companies. So these huge mega pharma companies are looking at this field of orphan drugs to extend their portfolio of products. But I want to share with you something more on a personal base. You know, all my life I worked for pharma, and most of my life I worked for pharma companies. I never saw a face of a patient outside the rooms of the physician. And when I became a manager, of course, that was a little bit harder as well. I started to work for Genzyme. I started to know each of the patients by name. I was with the patients in sad times and in good times. I went to weddings and to funerals. And this is just a picture of an Ethiopian young kid that when he was discovered, people said he cannot have Gaucher disease. Because Gaucher disease is prevalent only among Ashkenazi Jews, and Ethiopians are not Ashkenazi Jews. This everybody knows. But we had to open the mind of people and say, guys, but although the prevalence among other people that are pan-ethnics is 40,000, we might find among Israelis or Jews, we might find patients that are Ethiopian, that are from a Kurdish origin, or came from Iraq, or came from Egypt. And in the left side, you see a ceramic sign that is in the entrance of our office. And it always reminds each of my employees every day that we are there for them. We are there for the patients. Whatever we do is to save their life. We are not here for any other purpose. And this is something that we try to remember every day that we do what we do. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be here to answer. Thank you.
Very interesting and optimizing presentation. We still have a couple of minutes for questions. So, yes, please.
Are there any talks about extending IP rights for the inventors?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We hope that in the end of the day we'll be able to have governments and payers to an understanding that unless this process will happen, in the end of the day, the pipeline will be totally empty. We will get, after 20 years, almost 18 years, we'll get to the market, and no one will introduce a product when we will have only 2 or 5 years of IP in his hands. And unless there will be a change, we will not be able to introduce more new products.
Thank you. One more?
Done. Perfect.
Thanks once more.
Thank you, guys.